Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, July the 23rd, 2024. We now have the news that Joe Biden is withdrawing from the race to be elected president in November, and I suppose this was expected. And we do have a time for when he withdrew. It was approximately 1:45 in the afternoon on Sunday. I've got 1:46. I read somewhere else that it was 1:45. So that's the approximate time for his withdrawal. So we can cast a chart for that. And I'm going to be looking at the astrology of this event and how some of the people around him might be impacted by it. For example, his wife Jill Biden, Dr. Jill, and we've got, of course, Kamala Harris. And now we're thinking about Kamala Harris's vice presidential picks, and I've got the horoscopes of a couple. There are two I'm going to look at in this video. I'm going to look at Josh Shapiro, who is the governor of Pennsylvania, and Pete Buttigieg, who is he transport secretary. I mean, there are others. I suppose Gavin Newsom. I would have guessed it's pretty unlikely that Gavin Newsom is going to be Kamala Harris's vice presidential pick, because you've got two Californians on the ticket. Is that such a good idea? And I suppose she could go for, I don't know, Gretchen Whitmer, but then you might have to say, well, two women on the ticket. So I don't know, I'm just being logical about it. I'm not using astrology. And I understand that Pete Buttigieg is currently the favourite, so I'll be looking at his chart and Josh Shapiro's chart. Now, at the moment, I don't have times of birth for either. I also want to look at the Democratic National Convention, which is on August the 19th. And I think this is when the delegates formally make their votes, and that's when it's a done deal. I think this horoscope for the Democrat National Convention is potentially disastrous, and it may seal the fate of the Democratic Party in terms of this election if they're not very, very careful. It's serious, I think, this Democratic National Convention. And I know some people have been making comparisons between the Democratic National Convention in August, starts on August the 19th, with the Democratic National Convention, which started on August 26, 1968. Of course, they were both in Chicago. The Democratic National Convention in 1968 was just complete mayhem, rioting, and it really did not do the Democratic Party any favors, and led the way for Nixon's election in the following November. But before I look at all this, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, July the 23rd, 2024. Now, as far as the thumbnail is concerned, Joe Biden, that's Joe Biden, top left. That is Josh Shapiro. Then, of course, we've got Kamala and Joe Biden. Before I talk about today, just a reminder that if you like this video, I would be really grateful if you were to indicate that you like it by pressing the like button. If you like the video and you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe to this channel. I suppose it doesn't cost you anything, but does help my channel. Okay, so we have the moon moving into Pisces, moving from Aquarius to into Pisces this Tuesday. So let's show you that. So at noon New York time, Tuesday, July the 23rd, moon is at 1 degree 38 Pisces. So we have this transition from Aquarius to Pisces. Now, as far as timing is concerned, London time, the moon moves into Pisces at 2:23 p.m. So if you're in Europe, then in Africa, then you've got moon in Aquarius sort of in the morning, very early afternoon, perhaps up until lunchtime, and then the rest of the day you've got the moon in Pisces. If you are in Australia or New Zealand, then really you've got the moon in Pisces all day long. So to an extent, you've got the moon in Aquarius all day long. So it kind of depends where you are. So that is the lunar aspect, and the lunar position. And as far as aspects are concerned, just before the moon moves into Pisces, it does make an opposition of Mercury, which we may feel. Moon in Virgo, opposition Mercury in Leo. That might suggest a few issues regarding communication and how we express ourselves. Mercury in Leo is quite proud, and it likes to be taken seriously, yet moon in Aquarius, there's a certain sense of detachment there. So some of us might feel that we're not being taken seriously enough. I mean, we've got something important to say, and we expected people to listen to us, and they don't. And as a result, we might get angry. We might use words that we later regret. So we have to be a little careful with that moon opposition. Mercury. Now, there are other things going on. The Sun is making an opposition to Pluto. So the Sun went into Leo yesterday on Monday, and it's now 180 degrees from Pluto. So Sun opposition Pluto, it's an aspect that happens once a year, and it can be about something of a power struggle, people really wanting to assert themselves, but feeling that they perhaps can't. At least that's one way in which a Sun-Pluto opposition might work. It might also be that we are aware that there are things out there that are very powerful and need to be taken seriously. It's all too much, and we might feel that we can't assert ourselves. And this is a reminder about how Pluto can work. Pluto can intensify things, but it can also hide things as well. So yes, Pluto opposition the Sun can make us quite power hungry. We want to be taken seriously, but it can also make us afraid of power. So it sort of depends who we are and how we respond to the overall situation. I think it's just important not to be overwhelmed. We do need to assert ourselves. We should not be excessively afraid of authority. And just because someone else is playing power games doesn't mean that we should just withdraw from the situation. Maybe we need to stand up for ourselves. And aside from that, the moon, having gone through the sign change, makes a square to Mars. You can see that. Moon square Mars. So that means that the moon actually is sort of squaring the Mars-Uranus midpoint sort of early in the day. So we may have for some of us there may be a sort of Mars-Uranus return. I mean, when I say return, I mean flashback. We might just be reminded of that Mars-Uranus conjunction last week, because the moon sort of brings it together, and that does bring a certain amount of tension and maybe sort of aggravation and people trying to assert themselves and doing it in a kind of quite clumsy way. Then moon square Mars, it's an angry aspect. There's no doubt about that. People do get angry. People want to assert themselves. And I suppose you're getting moon square Mars at the same time as you're getting Sun opposition Pluto. So I do think there are moments of anger during the day, and some of us might have to tread carefully. Others just might have to be careful about our own anger. Is it necessary to show our anger? Is it achieving anything? It may be best that we just hold fire. And then towards the end of the day, Venus is making a sesquiquadrate to Neptune. So there's Venus. Venus is coming up to 15 degrees Leo, making a sesquiquadrate to Neptune. Now, that aspect should not be underestimated. It reminds us that Neptune is very close to the Aries point. Neptune is 29, 49 Pisces, something like that? Very close. And this is a time of uncertainty in general, with Neptune on the Aries point. And Venus, because it is sesquiquadrating Neptune, remember a sesquiquadrate is 135 degrees, which is 3/8 of the circle. So if you've got a cake, cut it into 8 bits. 135 degrees is three of those parts, assuming all those parts have the same size. So Venus sesquiquadrate Neptune, as the day progresses right towards the end of the day, there may be just a little bit of a sense of uncertainty. We're not quite sure where things are going. And maybe that uncertainty will relate to, could be relationships and how we deal with other people. Venus in Leo has expectations. Venus in Leo is quite proud, likes a bit of attention. When it runs into Neptune, don't over-interpret other people's actions. It's possible that someone does something or doesn't do something that causes us offence, is an affront to our pride. Maybe there's been mixed signals. Maybe we've misunderstood the situation. Maybe someone else has misunderstood the situation. But it's just important not to over-interpret it and sort of get really annoyed. And we get annoyed, and then that just causes further problems. Looking at the heliocentric picture, there are a couple of things that I think we should possibly take note of. So here is the position of the planets when you put the Sun at the centre of the solar system where it should be. Now, we have an opposition between the Sun and Pluto geocentrically. From a heliocentric point of view, by definition, it's a conjunction between the Earth and Pluto. So we have an Earth-Pluto conjunction. Again, that's by definition the same as a Sun-Pluto opposition. I kind of think it's nice to just see it in a different way, to say, oh, we've got Earth-Pluto conjunction here. Earth-Pluto conjunction is about, I suppose, the world changing, the world being subject to incredible pulls, and people are trying to assert themselves in the world. People are trying to transform this world, and different people with conflicting interests have their own agendas. So that's the Earth we are actually living in. And at the time this is happening, there is a square aspect between Venus and Jupiter. Remember, this is a heliocentric square. In fact, we've got a sort of a T-square here. We've got Mercury opposition Jupiter, separating from Jupiter, and Venus squaring Jupiter. So Venus square Jupiter, there could be a certain amount of indulgence, perhaps people taking things too seriously and putting too much energy into something. It may be easy to overspend. That's Venus square Jupiter. The two benefics, two nice planets. But when you put a hard aspect between Venus and Jupiter, there can be an overall sense of overindulgence. But I wouldn't worry about it too much, because this is a heliocentric chart. It's more about the collective rather than the individual. Okay, so having looked at that, I want to consider the 12 signs. So let me just switch back to the geocentric picture. And these are my forecasts for today for the 12 signs on Tuesday, July the 23rd, 2024. Aries. There has been a lot going on recently. A lot of excitement. You've now got a great sense of your own power, or at least a greater sense of your own power. I think for many Arians, Mars moving out of Taurus was a bit of a relief. Now it's in Gemini, you've got more room. There are lots of things you can do, and you don't have to be focused on any one thing. And you're probably still feeling a trine between Mars and Pluto. It gives you power. It gives you the ability to assert yourself. And at the same time, you're aware of your own words. Your words are taken seriously, and people are prepared to listen to you, and in many cases do things your way. Yet there can come a point where it just becomes too much of a good thing. And with the moon starting to move from Aquarius into Pisces, you may perhaps want to reconsider. You may feel that you need to look at things again, work out whether you're really making the right decisions, and also just getting your energy back. There's nothing wrong with that. Aries has a lot of energy, but can use that energy up very quickly. So perhaps you need a break. And one aspect that is going on today, which I think you perhaps need to be aware of, is the fact that there is a square between the moon and Mars. Now, this square between the moon and Mars, it could be energizing, but it's somewhat angry, and there is some danger that you just get angry about something in a way that's sort of impulsive. Maybe someone says something you don't like, you get offended, and you just blow up. And where does it all go? It's just a blast of emotion, and it just doesn't make anything easier. And so perhaps you should exercise some self-discipline, or avoid situations which might conceivably make you angry. And at the same time, I think, Aries, you do have to be tolerant. Other people may be somewhat unreliable and unpredictable. They might say one thing, do something else. That's one possibility. Or they might be somewhat fragile. People could be really wanting attention. Some people really close to you actually could want attention, and want more attention than you're actually prepared to give, at least to begin with. So ask yourself, to what extent does another person need to be flattered, or at least need to be acknowledged? You might be thinking about something else, but just by acknowledging someone, just by saying something nice, it could just calm them down, and it could allow you to avoid a difficult situation. Though I think there is some danger that some people are not really sure what they're doing, especially towards the end of the day, and they may get confused, not know how to respond to the situation, and do stupid stuff or say stupid things, and you perhaps have to resist the temptation to use that Mars in Gemini. Yeah, it's easy to criticize people verbally with Mars in Gemini if you're an Aries, but is it worth the effort? Perhaps you should hold fire. It might be best. So overall, Aries, I think you should try to have a quiet day and also try not to be too provocative. Taurus. Taurus, you may not have a complete understanding of everything that is happening around you. You know, you try, you think you get it, but it's just possible that you don't fully get it. And there may be a few things that you've actually gone and missed. So I would suggest, Taurus, that you don't jump to conclusions. Yeah, you could jump to conclusions, but you have to ask, what is the basis for what's the basis for the information in front of you? I mean, is it really written in stone, or have you made assumptions somewhere along the line? Because I think there is a real possibility that you have made assumptions. So perhaps you should take a step back and sort of review your calculations, or sort of consider, where did the facts come from? And that way you could at the very least save yourself from embarrassment. But I'm not saying, though, that you have made mistakes. I'm just saying that you need to be aware of that possibility. Now, if you are trying to project yourself in any way, shape or form, that you want to go beyond your immediate environment, you want to project yourself as an active player, perhaps at work or business or in your social life, but if you want to really project yourself powerfully, be aware that there is an opposition aspect between the Sun and Pluto. So this Sun-Pluto opposition does affect Taurians, and you may feel yourself to be under a certain amount of pressure. It's like there are things you want. I mean, you may really want them, but at the same time, wanting these things, doing what is required to get these things, could be really hard work. It could put you under a lot of pressure. So pressure levels could rise very quickly over the course of the day, especially if you've got any kind of agenda. It may be that you are getting in the way of someone else and you find yourself involved in a power struggle. That is one possibility. Or it may be about the clash of agendas. Okay, you've got things that you want to do, but it may be that there are forces outside. They want things done their way and they expect you to conform. So if you are going into work, for example, or I don't know, if you're involved in politics, then the pressure is on, and it may be a situation where you feel that there are winners and losers, and which one are you going to be? Is this going to be a situation you're going to triumph, someone else loses, or are you going to just give in? That's a possibility. But maybe you should say to yourself, this is not a conflict I want to get involved in. I'm not going to play that game. And that might be the easiest approach. You know, you're strongest when everything is done on your terms, and you're strongest on your own territory. Now, when you're on your own territory, you're not being pushy, you're not trying to infringe on anyone else's territory, but at least you're in a strong position. And perhaps that's what counts. Now, as far as your social life is concerned, friends, associates, mixing with people, there is a certain tendency to be sociable. You know, if you're in the Americas, I would have said that's pretty much all day long. If you're in Europe and Africa, that's going to be more towards the end of the day. Okay, Australia, New Zealand, let me get that straight. If you're in Europe and Africa, that's more late afternoon, evening. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, that might not be until the end of the day or into tomorrow. But at some stage, there's going to be this desire to be sociable, to see what other people are doing. But tread a bit carefully there. You might get involved with people. It seems amusing. It's what you want to do. You drift into one social situation, you drift out. But in the process, something might annoy you. It might be something to do with money, actually. As soon as people start talking about money, that's where the problems start. And if you're doing anything socially that involves financial expense, for example, I don't know, going to a restaurant, or particularly an expensive restaurant, then there could be problems. So people and other people, particularly friends and money, is a bad mix. So if possible, avoid financial dealings, especially with people you know, especially with your friends. Gemini. Now, a reminder that Mercury is your ruler, and Mercury is now in really very late Leo. It's moving on to the fixed star Regulus, and it'll be there for the next few days. So it's not anything that you've missed so far. But Regulus is a very fortunate star. It is about success and recognition. And so with Mercury on Regulus, regardless of what else is happening around you, I think it's a time when you can get recognized, when you can feel that you're doing something that is important, and most importantly, that you can get recognized. And Mercury is also the communication planet, so if there are people who are important, who you want to get in touch with, now might be your chance. You send an email or write a letter, and you think it's a waste of time, and you're sending it, you're communicating with someone who is of influence, and you think, well, what is the point? But you just never know, and it could hit the mark. So, don't underestimate yourself, and don't be overwhelmed by people just because they have high status, because they're important. Don't think that they're too important for you, because with Mercury on Regulus, you can get in touch with people of influence who can help you out in many different ways. And very soon, I should say that Mercury is going to move into Virgo, and so now is a chance to really up your game and to make the most of everything you've got. Because in some ways, Gemini, you're approaching some kind of a peak. Maybe it's sort of peak awareness, peak objectivity. And the reason I'm saying that is because Mercury, which is your ruler, is currently at maximum elongation. Maximum elongation. Now, its maximum elongation, 27 degrees. Now, what does that mean? What it means is Mercury is as far away from the sun as it can possibly get this cycle, 27 degrees. The sun is in very early Leo. Mercury is in very late Leo. Mercury does hug the sun, but this is as far as it gets. And what's happening now is Mercury is starting to, from a geocentric point of view, as Mercury, your ruler, is now starting to slow down, and it's starting to move at a lower rate than the sun. So now, from now on, Mercury is starting to get closer to the sun because it's preparing to go retrograde. I think, in I don't know, a couple of weeks' time, Mercury will be retrograde. So that's what's happening. But take advantage of the opportunity. So Mercury is not just on Regulus; it is at maximum elongation. So you have this great clarity, and you can see things for what they are. There's no clouds, no confusion. It's all there right in front of you. If you want to take advantage of this opportunity, and at the same time, Gemini, you're starting to think about your own achievements and what you would like to achieve in the short term, and you are helped by the fact that the moon is moving into Pisces. So, moon moving into Pisces, okay, it does depend to an extent on your time zone. Moon is in Pisces pretty much all day if you're in the Americas, late afternoon and this evening. Certainly if you're in Europe, it's more late this evening and into tomorrow if you're in Australia, New Zealand, Philippines, Vladivostok. So there's a certain time zone element, but still the message remains the same. You are starting to be ambitious, and the moon, when it moves into Pisces, it makes a square to Mars. And I think that this square to Mars, in your case, is actually quite fortunate, because Mars is moving through your sign. Mars is in Gemini, and the moon is in Pisces. Very ambitious place for the moon to be if you're a Gemini. So with that moon square Mars, you are able to put a great deal of energy into the achievement of your goals, into making things happen your way. Now, some people are going to be upset by your approach. You might make a few enemies. That is possible. Maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, you could be a little bit annoying, and I think your hastiness could be annoying. And of course, you have to make sure that your actions are appropriate. Is it necessary to make a big thing about something? Is it necessary to make a fuss? Maybe it's not, but perhaps it's just a time when you have to consider what is necessary, but where it is necessary. It may be okay to make a fuss. It may be okay to upset people, because if you get things right, I think today could be, very powerful. And I'm actually quite optimistic about today. But then I would say that, wouldn't I, being a Gemini? Cancer. Moon is in the process of changing sign from Aquarius to Pisces. And I would regard this sign change as being quite fortunate. Moon in Pisces. Pisces is a water sign. Pisces is a sign which allows you to, move beyond whatever's going on right now, to see the world in a new way, and not to be limited by an old set of rules. You can start to consider a new way of looking at things, perhaps a new set of rules. And so that is how the moon in Pisces might work. And I think with the moon in Pisces, it's perhaps a reminder that, just recently you've been perhaps a little bit too intense. You've been having to sort of work things out in your own way, and there's been a lot of thought, powerful thought, yes, but thought which may not always have been especially constructive. And with the moon moving into Pisces and making a square to Mars, you may feel that where you are right now is just not good enough. You want to move things further, and you're not going to tolerate it if anyone tries to hold you back. Some people might seem to be holding you back, or it's possible also that you're trying to work out what's happening and what's going on, and you may be thinking about, I don't know, you could be thinking about politics or religion, and maybe you want to discuss your feelings, and you might suddenly realize that you and someone else or other people have very different views of the world. I suppose this is a reminder that we live in a very polarized society. And it's not just, in the United States. I suppose we think about Trump and Biden and Kamala Harris and all these political arguments and dramas, and you're either on one side of a fence or on the other side of a fence. But it's not just in the United States. It's really across the world. And so the differences between you and other people in a political and philosophical sense may be very stark. And it's just important that these differences are negotiated. Your moon is in Pisces. That is a mutable sign. It's about change. It's aspecting Mars, another mutable sign. There is scope for compromise, perhaps. And I think, Cancer, it's just very important that you don't get annoyed with someone over something which is a matter of opinion. I think it could happen. I mean, even if you don't show your annoyance might be very real. And your annoyance may, for example, determine whether you want to keep someone as a friend. I mean, it could determine, it needn't determine. So I would have said, Cancer, don't take anything too seriously, because I think that would be, to be honest, I think that would be unnecessary. Now, another aspect happening today, which you might want to give consideration to, is an aspect between Sun and Pluto. Sun opposition Pluto. In many respects, this is the main event of the day. And the Sun and Pluto opposition is across the finance axis of your chart. And if you start thinking about money, then your thoughts could escalate, and you could start thinking about whether you're being treated fairly, whether perhaps there's some agreement or a contract that doesn't give you what you need or deserve. And so there may be a sense, Cancer, which you feel that something has been denied you financially, and that you need to stand up for your financial rights. And it may just be that there's money available. Either you get that money or someone else gets that money. The possibility of you and someone else both being able to financially benefit from something may be difficult to imagine, because it just does seem to be a question of winners and losers. So I suppose you have to identify what the issue is, if it's an issue. Of course, it may not be an issue. I'm just talking about the potential here, just a possibility, where the planets could be affecting you. So do look at your finances and see if there's any issue of power that needs to be addressed. But don't exaggerate. Try to be real. That is important. Sun Pluto opposition can indicate some kind of power struggle that may be a financial power struggle that may be quite insoluble. So if you decide to take on anyone in a financial sense, do realize what you're getting into, because it just may be some kind of struggle that just goes on, and you may take the view that it's not really worth the effort, remembering that the moon is moving into Pisces. Moon moving into Pisces is about rising above it all. And if you're spending all day, worrying about who owes who what, and worrying that you've been ripped off, then you're never going to be able to rise above things. So what you kind of have to do today, Cancer, is to rise above things, get things into perspective, but if you possibly can, keep one eye on your own interests, but without getting burnt up by it all. So it's a difficult balance, Cancer, but I think it's something that you actually can manage. Leo. So I was just talking to Cancer, and I was telling Cancer about this opposition between the Sun and Pluto. And this opposition between the Sun and Pluto does have an impact on you, Leo. And the reason is that the Sun is in Leo. It's your sign. And it's opposition Pluto, and Pluto is in Aquarius, which is your opposite sign. So we can say that you have got a Sun-Pluto opposition across the main axis of your chart. And this does need to be managed, but I don't think it should be exaggerated. The key point is, Leo, that the Sun is in Leo, your sign. Sun is very strong in Leo. In fact, all things being equal, the Sun works best in Leo, even better than it works in Aries. Using a point system I use, the Sun gets +5 for being in Leo, and only +4 for being in Aries. So the Sun is strong in Leo. So it's your time, no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean to say that everything is always going to be smooth. And this Sun opposition Pluto, you're perhaps going to be aware of things and people who appear to be holding you back, who perhaps could prevent you from achieving your potential. And you may take the view that it's really some kind of a struggle. So the question is, how do you deal with the situation? Now, it is possible that it's all about projection. You have some idea that there are dark forces out there trying to challenging you, trying to limit you, trying to control you. That might be your idea. Now, but those dark forces may not actually exist. They may just be part of your own unconscious world. Or those dark forces could be something on a collective level. You are picking up what everyone else is picking up. Pluto in Aquarius perhaps represents forces out there that are trying to control our lives. All of us, governments, large companies trying to control our lives. But for you, it's personal, but it's something you know already. We all know that already. So that's another situation where you're picking up on something. It's not a projection, but it's more of a collective concern, which for some reason you are making personal. Now, it is also possible that there are genuinely people out there who want to be in control and they are restricting your freedom of action or about to restrict your freedom of action. In that case, it is important to stand up for yourself, and I think you can be very successful when it comes to standing up to yourself because the sun is in Leo, and I think that really helps. And the sun in Leo it's very dynamic, it's very active, it wants to be there, it's all about acting rather than responding. But you can have too much of a good thing, and what's happening today is that the moon is moving into Pisces, and that provides an alternative view. Moon in Pisces is not active, it's not dynamic, it's more reflective. And with the moon in Pisces, I think that you may be able to benefit from a day or two of reflection. I mean, there's a lot to think about. Things have changed. The sun has gone into Leo. It's strongly placed. That is good, but it can't be positive all the time. A bit of reflection and being receptive can be very useful. It can help you to get your energy back. It's kind of like going into a spa. I've never been to a spa, but some people find spas very healing. So I'm not saying that you should go to a spa, but you should perhaps find the part of yourself which is you can find your sort of psychological spa, whatever it means. Just being close to water, for example. Obviously, I'm not encouraging you to take risks, but perhaps walking by a lake or by a river or by the sea, just getting in touch with water, because water is so different from the Leo reality. Leo is a fire sign. It's a very dry sign. And so having some water around, even if it's just in your mind, but the concept of the spa, being by the sea, even having a long bath. I mean, of course, people have baths anymore, but they have showers. But just seeing that relationship to water and relaxation and recovery and getting oneself back on form. So perhaps things have just got a bit too dry, and a bit of water. I don't know how you relate to that water. You've got to work with the symbolism, but by working with that symbolism, I think that you can really be helping yourself. So, that is, I think, the main theme today. You are in a strong position, but you just don't want to push yourself too hard, and you don't want to burn yourself out, and you possibly need a counterpoint today as the moon goes into Pisces, and getting in touch with water, provided you don't take any risks, might be a good thing to do. Virgo. Mercury is your ruler, and there are a couple of things going on with Mercury that we need to be aware of. Firstly, Mercury is getting very close to Regulus. Regulus is the royal star. I think I told you this yesterday, but I'm just pointing it out again. It's a nice star, Regulus. It's considered to be the most fortunate star. So with Mercury conjunct Regulus, things can happen. You can get recognized and you can get appreciated, and you're perhaps going to be very aware of your own significance. And people will regard you as being significant. And in terms of social advancement, I think you can go a long way. Somehow you're the right person at the right time. And that's the first thing to say about Mercury. The second thing to say about Mercury is that it's at its point of greatest elongation. So what that means is that it's as far away from the sun as it could possibly be. And it's reaching peak. And Mercury is now starting to slow down. Mercury is now moving, at least from an Earth's perspective, at a slower rate than the sun. I think it's now moving at around 56 arc minutes a day, and the sun moves, is currently moving 58, 59 arc minutes a day, 58 arc minutes a day. So this is a peak. This is kind of peak objectivity with this greatest elongation. You can see things as they are. It's totally obvious to you. And perhaps this has been something that has been brewing for a bit of time. You know, we had the full moon over the weekend, and the full moon is about the truth, seeing things for how they really are. And now you've got Mercury at greatest elongation, maximum objectivity. So you see it. It's all there in front of you. What are you going to do now? Well, I think you're in a good position. And you don't have to worry too much about trying to please other people, because it's a day when, well, not just a day, but it's a time when you can reflect and you can keep some things to yourself. Not everything has to be revealed, and your growing understanding of what is happening does not have to be revealed, at least not to begin with. Though I should point out that the moon is moving into Pisces, and this movement into Pisces means that you are becoming aware of other people, that's for sure, because Pisces is, it's a sign which is opposition Virgo. So there is an awareness of what other people can do and what other people can't do, and I think you're very aware of their limits. And I suppose it's true that in certain situations there are people who can really mess you around, or at least they can appear to mess you around, because they seem to be a law unto themselves, and they're not entirely predictable. And you might find that annoying, I suppose. But just remember, this is a time when you can see the truth for what it is. So if you try hard and you're in a situation where your patience is being tested, I think that you are able to get to the bottom of the matter and to actually understand what someone else is trying to achieve. Are they just being obnoxious? Are they just going through a bad phase? There are different possibilities here. And it's better to show understanding than to show annoyance. Yeah, you could show annoyance. The moon is square Mars. But is that necessary? I suspect actually that it is not necessary, because when you're dealing with anger, and I know there's a capacity for anger here, when you're dealing with anger, it means that essentially you have lost your objectivity. Yet it's the time when you are very objective. You can watch everything happening and evolving because of Mercury's position, because Mercury is its position of maximum elongation. So I do think that you're going to be able to control yourself very well, and you will understand the truth of the matter. And few things will be hidden. You know, it's a time when, sure, you can see what people are doing. It's kind of quite a sociable time. It's a sociable time in the sense that you are in touch with the outer world, and you're understanding how the outer world is working. But at the same time, you're able to keep a lot of things to yourself. Another point to make is that overall, you are actually quite lucky at the moment. It might not feel like it, but things really can go your way. And it's partly to do with the fact that Mercury is conjunct Regulus and you've got the Mercury at greatest elongation. I think that helps. But it's also the fact that Mercury is currently semi-square the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. So remember, last weekend we had a Venus-Jupiter sextile. Very nice aspect. In fact, we can say that Joe Biden, he pulled out of the nomination on the day of a Venus-Jupiter sextile. And that's something interesting, something I will be considering later in the video. But from your perspective, having Mercury semi-square the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, Mercury semi-square the Venus-Jupiter midpoint does give you a certain amount of, good fortune. I mean, let me give you an example. Let's look at the combination of stellar influences, Reinhold Everton. So we look at the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and we look at Mercury on the Venus-Jupiter midpoint, and it says mirth, a love of entertainment, optimism, a sense of humour, happiness in thought, the tendency to think of future happiness in love. That's great, isn't it? So maybe that's a thing that you should really emphasize. You can be yourself. You don't have to be in the middle of things. You can reflect, but at the same time, you can have this just fundamental optimism, helped by the fact that Mercury is on Regulus. That's great. So overall, Virgo, if you think positively and you concentrate on the things that are life enhancing, then I think it can actually be, Virgo, it could be actually quite a brilliant day. Libra. So Venus is your ruler, and Venus is right in the middle of Leo. It's pretty much 15 degrees Leo. So that means that Venus is sesquiquadrate the Aries point. You're very focused on the world out there. You can just feel what's happening in the world out there, and perhaps what you watch on the news is going to have an impact on you. Yeah, things happening on the other side of your country, other side of the world, they matter. And that can be good. I mean, it's good to have a global awareness, but it can go too far, especially as Neptune, is also on the Aries point. So what we have is Neptune making Venus making a sesquiquadrate to Neptune. Neptune very close to 0 degrees Aries. Venus at 15 Leo. And you just being aware of everything. And that could be tough. And it's a kind of a contradiction, isn't it? Because at the moment, Venus is in Leo. Venus in Leo is very much about the self. It's about your identity, about being recognized for who you are and what you can achieve. And your own boundaries, I suppose, are quite important. You want to be an individual. You don't just want to be part of the collective. Yet you are kind of aware that you are part of the collective, because Venus is sesquiquadrate the Aries point, because Venus is sesquiquadrate Neptune. And somehow you have to distinguish between what is useful and what is not useful. It's good to be aware. There's no doubt about that. Being aware of one's world matters. If we are just totally isolated, only thinking of ourselves, well, that's almost the path to spiritual destruction, isn't it? If we want spiritual elevation, we do need to be connected with everything. Especially from a Buddhist perspective, what does it say with Buddhism? You can't achieve enlightenment unless you're part of the whole creative process, I think, something like that. But there's a danger of being overwhelmed. Boundaries exist for a purpose, and Libra, you need to be aware of your boundaries. You need to respect your boundaries. You need to make sure that other people are respecting your boundaries, and you need to make sure that you're just not being overwhelmed by just too much information, too many feelings, too many worries, the whole weight of the world and its many problems. You can't solve them all. So that goes back to boundaries. And we see this also with the fact that the moon is starting to move into Pisces. And so with the moon moving into Pisces, that is a time, yes, you could be overwhelmed. Boundaries are very porous, but you therefore have to make a special effort to look after yourself. You need to make sure that there is always some distance. However much you feel about other people's suffering, distance really does matter, because you need to protect yourself. That is your first priority. And if you can protect yourself, then you can start being useful. So that's perhaps the main thing happening today. Now, I don't want to give the impression that it's a day when you have to spend your time being cautious, always trying to escape being overwhelmed by forces out of your control. I don't want to give that impression. Venus is your ruler. It may be on the Aries point, but it's still quite close to a sextile of Jupiter. That's the first point. And Jupiter is allowing you to see things in a new perspective, and that's perhaps what's happening. It is good that you're seeing the broad view, and perhaps what you need to do is communicate what you're seeing, and just focusing on something that is important to you, but something that matters. So if something worries you, or you regard something as being really, really important, don't keep it to yourself. I know that Librans sometimes don't want to cause unnecessary upset. You're very aware of the the delicate social balance, but sometimes there are things that do need to be talked about, and just by talking about things with great passion and intensity, it can almost draw the thing out, and you're going to be less concerned about it, perhaps because you feel that something that was on your mind is being shared. So this may be a case of whatever, a trouble shared. How does it go? A trouble shared is a trouble halved. You know what I mean? So do make an effort to discuss whatever is bothering you. but I don't really want to create a problem where there is no problem. I'm just looking at things perhaps from an excessively negative view. I mean, reality is, Venus is in Leo. That's a very nice place for Leo to be in some respects, especially if it's sextile Jupiter. So, the overall situation is fortunate, but it's just important, Libra, that you do respect your boundaries and just don't get completely overwhelmed, and that you also need to watch out for people who perhaps are throwing their weight around. Okay, the moon, when it moves into Pisces, it does make a square to Mars. That Mars may represent an opinionated person who may be more trouble for their worth. So that is possible. Scorpio, you are quite intense and powerful at the moment in your own way. And that is because there is an opposition aspect between the Sun and Pluto. So, the Sun is in Leo. It's in a sector of your chart which is very high profile, very focused. That's Sun in Leo, and it is opposition Pluto. So that opposition Pluto could really make you very ambitious. You may just feel there are things you want to achieve, and you want to achieve them now, and you are not going to tolerate any resistance or people trying to oppose you, trying to question what you're doing. I think you seem very, very sure of yourself, and that might be a good thing. And it certainly seems to be the case that you can bring to bear, the full power of your personality. Sun opposition Pluto. You can reach into the depths and really show the world what you can do. But maybe you shouldn't be too focused on getting short-term results. It's just a sense of your own power. The Sun has only just gone into Leo, so the Sun has got quite a long way to run before it leaves the sign. And this is just the beginning. And so you have a sense of what you can do and what you want. And so maybe what you're doing now is you're setting out for yourself what you want to achieve between now and, say, the end of August. So don't be in too much of a hurry. And while this is happening, we have got the moon moving into Pisces. And moon moving into Pisces is quite nice, actually, because Pisces is a water sign. It has great sympathy with Scorpio, which is your sign. And so with moon in Pisces, that provides a little bit of a contrast to that Sun opposition Pluto. Sun opposition Pluto is just a little bit too intense. And moon in Pisces allows you to have a bit of flow there. And if you want to be really successful, it's perhaps part of it is about your sensitivity and your ability to be creative in your own way. I think that is really important. And I think the moon in Pisces is going to allow you to do that. And just try not to take things too seriously. Things are serious enough. And when I say serious enough, I mean that kind of in a positive way, because you are very aware of what you can achieve and what can be achieved. But if you take things too seriously, then I don't know, it just could make things overly difficult, and you may actually find that your own ability to get things done is actually reduced, and so a bit of levity could matter. But the moon is square Mars, and yeah, that does bring the possibility of getting angry about something. Maybe you will perceive a threat from somewhere. You're going to be sure that something is threatening you, something is preventing you from doing everything you want to achieve. Someone is, interfering with your creative process, and that might require strong action on your part. But I think to get angry in that situation would possibly be mistaken. And what we might actually be talking about, Scorpio, is a creative challenge. Now, you may think that you've got everything sorted out, that you may think that you understand your creativity, you understand what you're good at, and that's what you want to concentrate on. But it's possible that your own view of your own creativity is slightly too limited. You maybe haven't got the whole picture, and maybe you need to be creative in a slightly new way, but you don't want to do it. You feel maybe it's beneath you, or you can't be bothered. You don't want to do it. And when you're being pushed to push yourself, to push your horizons, you might resist it. You've got everything sorted out. You don't want to have to rethink the situation. But I'm not asking you to rethink the situation. I'm asking you to consider the possibility of expanding the situation. I just think that you may have been actually too limited in terms of how you perceive what you can do. So, ironically, you may be so ambitious, so focused on being successful, that you miss out on the real key to your success. So be flexible there. And when you look at what you're good at, how you can be creative, it may be not quite as narrow as you'd realized. So consider something new, and don't get angry or annoyed if anyone suggests that you push yourself a little bit further, that you try something new. And of course, don't get angry with yourself. And I suppose you might get angry by kind of at some level realizing that you're not taking things as far as you should, and you don't take it as far as you should, and then you get annoyed. But try to be flexible, and do consider the possibility that your genius is more widespread and more inclusive than you'd actually realized. Sagittarius. Sagittarians may feel that they have kind of done their bit. You've said what you had to say, and that really there's nothing more to it. That you can perhaps withdraw. You might maybe enjoy home comforts, but not feel any obligation to do anything. I mean, it's always good not to feel obligation. I mean, why should we feel obliged? That's certainly not what we want. But if you spend, too much time worrying about what's happening out there, feeling that it's all getting a bit too much, feeling that maybe you need to stick to what you know and trust. I don't know. I think there could be a sense in which it's a bit of a waste. I mean, you've always got to do your best. And I think now is perhaps not a time for laziness. It's a time for grounding, for sure. Especially as the moon is moving into Pisces. Pisces is about for you, Sagittarius, Pisces, is about finding your real security, some situation where you are comfortable. Oh, actually, where you are emotionally comfortable. I mean, that's important. I mean, I know and understand that Sagittarius is not considered to be the most emotional sign, but emotions still matter, and you need to be in a place where your emotions are being nurtured, but at the same time you don't want to restrict yourself. And there are going to be challenges. The moon in Pisces, it does make a square to Mars. So even when you are feeling 100% secure, everything is sorted out, at that very moment where you're feeling everything is sorted out, something may happen which just aggravates you. And the less prepared you are, the more aggravating it is. Or, put another way, if you ignore people today, then that could make matters worse. Because if you ignore people, they're still going to make their presence felt. And you're still going to have to respond to their actions, to their words. So ignoring people, it might be tempting, but I don't think it's a good idea. I think you have to accept other people's points of view and try to understand what they want as early as possible, because then you will be able to anticipate their demands, and that's going to make things a lot easier. Though, having said all this, Sagittarius, I think that you can have an impact. Probably you should have an impact. If you wait for other people to have an impact on you, then that is a recipe for annoyance. But on the other hand, if you start to have an impact on other people, if you start to, really tell the world who you are and be ready to surprise the world, then, with the element of surprise, I think that you are really going to be able to benefit. And another thing, Sagittarius, is that you should not underestimate other people. There are some people who are actually very well placed. They're in a strong position, and you can benefit from them. And at the same time, if you decide to take them on, if you get into a conflict with them, it's not going to work. I think you could end up being the loser. So do bear that in mind. But there are people out there who really can help you. They can, for example, give you new connections. They can give you advice. And if you're finding yourself to be confused and you're finding you're losing your objectivity, then that really is a situation where someone else can come in and help. Just talking to someone and getting their feedback could be just a really useful exercise. And you just may hear something that you hadn't heard before, and just facts which you thought you really understood can be fed back to you in a new way. And that can give you an understanding of who you are, what you're supposed to be doing, and what did seem somewhat confusing can actually be quite reassuring. Capricorn, you're starting to feel that it's maybe easier to express your fundamental self. Recently you perhaps haven't really been in the mood, or you felt it wasn't the right time, but I think you actually have an understanding of what is happening. And if you get annoyed about something, I think that you're going to be able to express that annoyance quite effectively. I mean, yes, there is a square between Moon and Mars today, Okay, it could be late today, depend if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but with this moon square Mars, you can express yourself with great urgency and power, and also with a certain amount of self-discipline. And in this way, you can get people to take you seriously. And I think people will take you seriously, and at the same time, you will be able to adjust your communicative skills depending on the situation. So you understand that different people have to be treated in different ways. And of course, if you treat everyone in the same way, well, you're not going to get anywhere, are you? But this flexibility to be able to treat different people in different ways is going to be really useful. And I think that people are going to appreciate you, and they're going to want to come back to you. So if you meet someone, you talk to them, you tell them about yourself, they will be impressed, even if they don't say it, and they will come back to you. They're going to want to remain in touch with you. So it is a good time for, shoring up your social situation and perhaps getting to know new people. Though one thing, Capricorn, that may be of particular concern to you is money, and the reason is because there is an opposition between the Sun and Pluto today, and this Sun-Pluto opposition may be about complicated money. Money not about your personal bank account, but more about shared money, joint bank accounts, financial dealings with another person. It could be in certain situations about wills, trusts, legacies, that kind of complicated money that has to be dealt with. And yeah, it is complicated. And you are aware also perhaps that money is a symbol. Money is not just about buying things. It's about a sign of respect. How do you evaluate someone? It depends on how much you pay them. And I suppose if you're being not paid enough, or someone quibbles what you want and they say they want to pay you less, it's about a personal affront. And I think that you will take all of that very seriously. And you don't want to take it too seriously, Capricorn. But I think it is a time when you can engage with complicated financial issues and really understand what's going on. And you're a Capricorn, of course, known for being quite a materialistic sign. So I think it is a time when you can engage with money in really quite an effective way. And yeah, don't be afraid of it. And don't be afraid of the complications. It may not just be about money, though. It may also just be about emotion. I think there are some powerful emotions going on today. Emotions, the kind of emotions that aren't really expressed. And there may be just something that you find yourself feeling that is increasingly important. And as the day progresses, you get this Sun opposition Pluto, just feeling that something really matters and is not trivial and needs to be taken seriously. Now, you don't want to just spend ages and ages thinking about the same feeling, obsessing about it. You need to have a resolution at some stage. And I think that what's happening is that you're being forced to perhaps take something which is perhaps quite a private feeling and start to think about how it can be transformed into something real in terms of a change in your immediate environment. And I think that's a change that you can actually bring about, because overall I think that you are quite intense today, but you are in a good position and people are taking you seriously and people are respecting you. So maybe that all comes together and in the end you can really be taken seriously and you can get things done and you can make your life better and quite possibly make other people's lives better as well. Aquarius. So the Sun-Pluto opposition keeps coming up, doesn't it? I was talking about it to Capricorn, and I'm going to talk about it to you as well. So, Sun-Pluto opposition is the main aspect happening today, I think. Sun in Leo, opposition Pluto in Aquarius. And this opposition between Sun and Pluto does hit the main axis of your solar chart. Because, you've got Pluto in Aquarius, Pluto in the first degree of Aquarius. Sun is in the, just past the first degree of Leo, 1 degree, 1 degree 17 Leo, noon in New York, and Pluto is 0 degrees 52 Aquarius at the same time. So we've got the Sun-Pluto opposition, and it hits the main axis. So what does that mean? I think, Aquarius, what it means is that you are aware of the power relationship between yourself and other people. You're aware that not just other people, perhaps other organizations, governments, whatever the other side of the power equation is. There's you and there's everyone else. Or there are other things which are trying to perhaps keep you in line. So it's always a delicate thing. And at the moment, it just becomes clear to you, Aquarius, that certain people do have a lot of power, or certain organizations have a lot of power. Or at least it should be becoming clear to you. And this is not something that you can discount, that you can just sweep under the carpet. And in comparison to them, in comparison to the other, you're aware that there are limits to your power. And you don't take kindly to that. That's Pluto. Pluto is in Aquarius. You are now aware fully of the power equation, and you don't hold all the cards. Now, I'm not saying that to sort of put you down or to be negative. I'm just pointing out to a reality there. And once you are aware of that reality, you can start addressing it. Now, so that means, in the first instance, Aquarius, that it's just important not to overestimate yourself, just to take things slowly. If other people have most of the power, then there's no point in trying to take them on, is it? I mean, it's like, is it Mao Zedong, talking about how to win battles or win wars, enemy advances, I retreat, or whatever. You have to understand the situation. In the end, you will be victorious. But short term, not so much. Short term, just accept, if you regard the whole thing as a war, then just accept the situation right now. And, things will change. As you become more powerful, you can change your approach. But just right now, you just have to accept the situation and adapt. But in a way, this power thing is only a real importance if you've got big ambitions. There are things you want to do right now, for example. And perhaps you have to accept that right now you haven't got enough strength in relation to something else in order to achieve everything you want to achieve. So a bit of realism on your part would, I think, go a long way. And it's just now a time perhaps to think about gathering your strength, working out where your weaknesses are, where other people's strengths are, and slowly but surely changing the situation. And it may be a very long process. I mean, look at Pluto. Pluto is in Aquarius. That's good, I think. I mean, it puts you in a strong position. It makes you very aware of your transformative potential. Now, Pluto does leave Aquarius. It goes into Capricorn in the autumn, not for long. So there may be a time where you feel you're losing your edge, but then it comes back into Capricorn. Then Pluto comes back into Aquarius, and then it stays in Aquarius until the 2030s. So, perhaps Aquarius, you just need to take a long-term perspective, and that might be the way forward. Pisces, Moon is moving into your sign. And it's always good when the Moon moves into Pisces. You feel that you are present. You feel at one with the world. You understand what's going on emotionally. But you also understand what's holding you back. And some things indeed might be holding you back. So perhaps you may obsess a little. Ideally with Pisces, you keep moving. It's all about flow. And what Pisces doesn't want to do is just get stuck somewhere. You stay in the same place. When you stay in the same place, the problems mount up. So ideally, you keep moving. But there just may be a point today, could be tomorrow, depends on your time zone, but when you just focus too much energy on one thing, and then it takes over everything, and you just really can't get anything done, and you just get annoyed, and the whole thing is completely unsatisfactory. So what might that be? It could be that you just put a little bit too much energy into dealing with home and family. That's possible. I mean, I understand home and family are important, but there just may be things going on at home or in your family that just start to take up a lot of your time, and that could be annoying. And so don't spend too long focusing on a home and family issue. Okay, maybe necessary. I mean, who knows what's going on, but I think in most cases, just be ready to move on. Or perhaps better still, reframe the discussion. So if you've got a conflict situation or something is bothering you, maybe you need to look at it another way. And Pisces is very good at changing things. So perhaps you need to reframe a discussion to make it perhaps less about conflict, less about differences, and to be more about the potential for cooperation. And on the plus side, it may be the case with this moon square, there is a square between Moon in Pisces and Mars in Gemini. This may be about you and people you know very well, perhaps members of your family, getting involved in a common project, but ideally a project that requires a lot of energy, a lot of maybe, physical energy. Maybe it's having to, move things around, dig holes, whatever. When I say dig holes, I suppose, I'm thinking about whatever, gardening, yard work, however you want to call it, something like that, some cooperative project that involves you and people you know well, where you're all focused on the same thing, The advantage of physical effort is, of course, if you're physically applying yourself, then that kind of reduces the possibility of anger and conflict. You're burning off that sort of negative energy in a sort of a physical way. So that might be a way of dealing with the situation. And at the same time, Pisces, don't think that you have got all the answers. Now, however clever you might be, there are people out there who have some very useful ideas, who are themselves very clever, who are on really good form. One or two people are on really good form at the moment, and they're capable of a high level of objectivity. And it could be a great time for getting advice from that someone who, I don't know, you probably know who I'm talking about, but someone who's just has a certain amount of objectivity. They might also be quite well connected. So do take advantage of your social environment. It may not be actually what you want to do, but I think you could actually really benefit from certain people's help. So, if you've got a problem, if you want help, don't be afraid to ask. And that is it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 28, which is preponderance of the great. And this hexagram is somewhat difficult because you can see, if you look at it, you can see these 4 unbroken lines in the middle. And what this represents is a big weight, huge weight. And the top and the bottom, you've got a broken line, and that in a way represents the handles. So if you think about it, the handles are just really insufficient to be able to carry this weight. And one of the images of this hexagram is about a beam being really pulled down, and it might be in danger of breaking. And so we're dealing with a situation where we're wondering whether it's actually too much for us. It's a huge weight. Preponderance of a great is a big responsibility we've got at the moment. And our concern is, can we handle it? And fortunately, we do have a moving line. We have the 4th line from the bottom moving. And the indication here is that probably we can handle it, particularly if we adopt the right approach. We need to be thinking about the greater good. The I Ching is very much about the greater good. It's about the collective. It's about our role in the hierarchy. We need to think beyond ourselves. So if we are faced with a big burden, something that really is difficult to carry, but we're thinking about helping everyone, helping our family, helping our community, helping the world, and that is our motivation, then we're going to find a way through. And I think that will be a situation that is further improved by our relationship with other people. Other people can come round to help us, and it just may be a situation where there may be a certain sense of rescue here. Preponderance of the great. It's something that is really, really hard to carry, there is a danger that we lose control of it, but it is a situation also that can be rescued, because we are working on something that is useful not just for ourselves, but for a lot of other people as well. If we keep that in mind, then we're going to be okay. But the I Ching, I think it's the Wilhelm translation in particular, does have a warning. If we've got a big weight, but something really difficult to carry, but it's all about ourselves, it's all about our selfish machinations, then that's not such good news. I don't know, I suppose you can think of a bank robber carrying his swag, a huge bag of money and gold and stuff, and it's just weighing him down, and he's trying to keep moving, but the bank robber is only concerned about his or her own well-being. Well, in that situation, it's not going to work. We have to come in with the right motivations, and if it's all about society, it's all about other people, if it's all about improving everyone else's life, then that is the right motivation. If it's selfish, okay, then preponderance of the great may really be too much, and we might be just destroyed by the whole thing. But I'm sure that's not going to happen. I'm sure we're all being very charitable and humanitarian, and this will allow us to move forward and find the help we need, and the preponderance of the great can move to the next hexagram, a hexagram which we had quite recently, and that is hexagram 48, which is the well. So the well, remember, is something that's always there, and it's also something which is there for everyone else's benefit. The well is there for the village to get its water from. It's a resource that's always there. And maybe this is actually what's actually happening, what we're trying to achieve. Maybe these two hexagrams are talking about a process of construction. We are trying to build a resource which is always going to be there, which is going to be available for us, and it's going to be available for other people. So it's a very community-minded thing. And so perhaps that great weight we're carrying is something that is required to build the well being something which is for everyone. We all need water. It may not literally be water, but whatever that resource is. And because we're thinking about the community, we're thinking about the village, then good luck will be on our side, and we'll be able to build this well, and we'll be able to create something that is just going to be always there for ourselves and for others. And it's not a zero-sum situation. And of course, it's very easy to see it as a zero-sum situation today, because we've got that Sun opposition Pluto. That Sun opposition Pluto is encouraging a zero-sum view of the world. We gain or we lose. My gain is your loss. Your loss is your gain. Is your loss? My loss is your gain. We can't both gain. One of us has to win. One of us has to lose. That might be how Sun opposition Pluto is working. And so this I Ching is asking us to confront that Sun opposition Pluto. So it's not about your gain, my loss. It's about everyone's gain. And if we can have a collective approach, then we're going to be okay. We're going to be able to carry the great weight because it's for a good purpose, and we're going to be able to build the well, and everyone is going to benefit. And now it's time to look at some Democrats. Joe Biden announcing that he is pulling out, that he's not seeking the nomination for November. I suspect that if he'd really wanted to do Kamala Harris a real favour, he would have just resigned as president and allowed her to become president and allowed her to fight the November election as president, I think. Of course, we don't don't know for sure whether Kamala Harris is going to be the nominee. At the moment, it seems to be pretty much a certainty, but I suppose things can change. So let's start by looking at the horoscope of that time when Biden pulled out. So that was on Sunday, and I think that it's quite an interesting chart. So I just called it Biden drops out, and I was told 146. One commenter on this channel said 146. I heard somewhere else that he'd made a decision a minute earlier at 1:45 p.m. on Sunday. So I think that is fairly close to the time. So I am going to go with that. And so looking at this chart, there are a couple of things to point out. As many people have pointed out, it happened just after a full moon. There was a full moon at 28 degrees 9 minutes 28 degrees 9 minutes sorry, when was it? Was the full moon, was it? Sorry, the full moon was at 29 Capricorn. I think 29 degrees 9 minutes Capricorn. So I suppose you could say, well, the full moon is about the truth, a realization. There's no doubt anymore. This is the way it is. I mean, let's have a look at the full moon, by the way, just to remind ourselves as to what the full moon was doing just before this event. So I mean, this was actually the full moon set for sort of around 6:15 in the morning, Washington DC. You can see that this full moon is actually quite telling. Full moon is right on the ascendant. So the ascendant was at 1 degree 32 Leo. We had Pluto. We had the sun. It's pretty much at sunrise, the full moon, and Pluto was on a descendant. So this full moon hit Washington, quite clearly hit Washington. I think that was quite easy to say. And of course, everyone was saying that Sunday Biden would make an announcement, and this was when he made the announcement. So that's all pretty clear in terms of what's going on. Also, the announcement, full moon, the time of a full moon, and at the time of this announcement, look, Mercury's square Uranus. Mercury's applying to the square of Uranus. And then at the time that Biden drops out, we have really close Mercury-Uranus square. The announcement is out. And immediately this happened, everyone was focusing on Kamala. Okay, Biden did not immediately endorse Kamala. He had to make a second statement, I think, endorsing her. I've heard some questions about why that is the case. Was he pushed into making an endorsement or what? And so there is Kamala. Venus. It's kind of, you've got Venus close to the midheaven. The spotlight is suddenly on Kamala. I think that does seem to really fit. And also, look at Venus and Jupiter. There was an exact Venus-Jupiter sextile at the time of this announcement. And you could say that there is a fortunate aspect or fortunate side to this announcement because of that Venus sextile Jupiter. I mean, I'm not saying that in the end it's going to work out brilliantly for the Democratic Party. I think there are other reasons to think that maybe it won't. But still, Venus sextile Jupiter. And this was a time where Kamala Harris became a front runner. It became increasingly certain, not That's not a completely done deal, but she would be the candidate to be president, for the Democratic candidate to be president in November. So I think that is quite a telling chart. And notice that Mars has just gone into Gemini. And that's probably relevant if we look at Biden's chart. So here is Joe Biden's horoscope, and here is the chart of the announcement. So if you're into whole sign houses, then you would say, well, Biden has got Sagittarius rising, so Mars going into Gemini. Mars is going to his 7th house, and so perhaps that's his enemies. Finally, when I say enemies, I mean his rivals, all the people who don't want him to be the nominee in November, who didn't want him to be the nominee in November. And so they eventually get their way. Mars goes into Gemini, and that's it. So it's just interesting the way that happened. And so looking at other stuff going in his chart, just a reminder that, he had Saturn on his IC. He's had this Saturn on his IC for a month or two, and it's just not very helpful. So Saturn got really close to his IC, and then it sort of went retrograde. So I don't think that's particularly helpful. And then Uranus was pretty close to Biden's sun. I mean, when I was looking at what was going on in his chart, I mean, I certainly thought, when I was looking at this, sort of a month ago, quite recently, I thought Uranus opposition his sun could be difficult. But I suppose we shouldn't forget that he's still president. People are it's almost as if he's gone, but he hasn't gone. He's going to be president as it stands until January the 20th. So that Uranus opposition, his sun, is still going to be pretty active. So so that is Biden's chart. What about his wife? So I've heard it said that Jill Biden, Dr. Jill, that Dr. Jill quite likes being First Lady. And maybe she'd like to be First Lady for another 4 years. And maybe some of the pressure for him to stay as president, to run for another term, was coming from her. So you would have thought that this would be quite a blow for Dr. Jill to have to think about vacating the White House in January. Of course, Joe would have to win for that to happen. But so here's her chart. Here's Jill Biden's chart. She is, like her husband, she's got Gemini rising. Sagittarius rising. She's got Sagittarius rising, and she's got a load of planets in Gemini. Moon, Mars, and the Sun. And in terms of the transits concerned, so we've got Jill Biden's chart in the middle, and we've got the planets for the moment she dropped out. For the moment Joe Biden dropped out. And what is fascinating is that Jill Biden's sun is at 1237 Gemini, and Jupiter is at 1229 Gemini. So she dropped out. Sorry, her husband dropped out as Jupiter, transiting Jupiter, was making the exact conjunction to her sun. Now, a couple of points about that. Firstly, with Jupiter transits, one tends to think that they're good. I mean, at least when one first starts learning astrology. If we're right about Jill Biden, or at least if I'm right about Jill Biden, that she wanted to stay in the White House, this may have been quite a bitter blow for her. I don't know. And it was brought about with Jupiter conjunct her sun. So in this case, Jupiter is acting as a release. it's been obvious for some time. Jupiter conjunct her sun, it's obvious, it becomes clear. That's the first point. The sun, of course, is a male planet. It is could at some level represent Joe. I suppose he could also be represented by Mars, but she's got Sun and Mars very close together. So Jupiter hitting Sun may be about her husband and what his decisions are. And another point about Jupiter is that Jupiter has no dignity here. Jupiter is in Gemini. It's peregrine. It has no dignity. And so that might mean that Jupiter's transit to her Sun may not have been as fortunate as one might have expected, and maybe that Jupiter conjunct her Sun, transiting Jupiter conjunct her Sun, was actually quite malefic. Now, recently I have been talking about Black Moon Lilith. And Black Moon Lilith, there are different types of Black Moon Lilith. There is the mean Black Moon Lilith, and there is a true Black Moon Lilith. And so which one does one use? So Black Moon Lilith, at the time of Joe Biden's withdrawal from the nomination, was at 12 degrees 47 minutes Virgo. At least that is the true Black Moon Lilith. Okay, the true Black Moon Lilith is at 12:47 Virgo, and the mean Black Moon Lilith is where has it gone? Is at 2 degrees Libra. Sorry, I got that wrong. So basically there's a substantial difference in the position of the true Black Moon Lilith and the mean Black Moon Lilith. Mean Black Moon Lilith at 2 degrees 29 Libra, and the true Black Moon Lilith at 12 Virgo. So that is actually, that's 20 degrees apart. I mean, that's a huge difference. So going back to Joe Biden's chart and the outer wheel. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is that Jupiter was exactly square the true Black Moon Lilith at the time of the announcement. I suppose Black Moon Lilith as something perhaps being eclipsed, maybe. But the point is that Black Moon Lilith was square. So that's Joe Biden's, I'm getting into a bit of a mess here. Let's go back to Jill Biden's chart. Okay, there we go. So Black Moon Lilith was, true Black Moon Lilith was exactly square Jill Biden's Sun, at a time where Jupiter was exactly conjunct her Sun. So I think that Black Moon Lilith was probably driving Jill Biden crazy. I mean, Jill Biden was perhaps in some ways represented Black Moon Lilith. You could say, was she a creature of the night, trying to get her enjoying the White House, wanting to stay in the White House as First Lady for another 4 years? That's possible. And that Black Moon Lilith square her Sun, it just spoiled everything with Jupiter on her Sun as well. So I think that is kind of interesting. Of course, also with Jill Biden, we've got her transiting Saturn was at 19 degrees 2 Pisces, and so transiting Saturn is square her ascendant, which is not particularly good. So I think that the issues that Jill Biden has been having a pretty clear look at the transiting South Node on her midheaven. So I do think that in many respects, Joe standing down was kind of affecting his wife more than him. And then we have to consider Kamala Harris. Surely this must have had some impact on her when she got the news. So this is her chart. We've got Kamala Harris's chart in the middle. She's got 24 Gemini rising. It's kind of interesting if you take the rising sign as being important, that the moment Mars goes into Gemini, the focus is immediately on her. It does become important. Now the battle starts. Perhaps that's how you'd see it. If you take whole sign houses, now she's got Mars and Jupiter in her whole sign first house. Yeah, the things are really happening, and this is where she, I suppose, has to fight. And look at the ascendant. If we got the ascendant correct, and if it was 1245, the ascendant in Washington DC was at 141 Scorpio, and so that ascendant is close to Kamala Harris's Mercury, very close at 128 Scorpio. But when did it all start? When did the Biden presidency start? And it started at his inauguration. And I've looked at his inauguration chart, Biden's inauguration chart, a lot. And it is a terrible inauguration chart. And, we shouldn't forget that he's going to be president unless he decides to resign and give Kamala Harris the presidency. He's going to be president for the next 6 months. And what I really wanted to focus on with this inauguration chart, there are other things to consider. Okay, inauguration happened at on a Mars-Uranus conjunction, exact Mars-Uranus conjunction, and a week ago we had Mars-Uranus conjunction again. So the inauguration was really kind of singing to or chiming to the Mars-Uranus energy. So that kind of makes sense. But there's something else I noticed which I thought was interesting, is that it's to do with the Sun-Saturn conjunction. So the Sun at an inauguration is always at 0 degrees Aquarius, by definition, ever since the inaugurations were shifted back from March until January. I think, off the top of my head, was Truman in 1948? Was that the first time it got moved to January? Certainly, by the late 40s, 50s, you no longer had a March inauguration. It was taken to January. So comparing the inauguration chart with Biden dropping out, so it's really interesting. So Pluto was at 0 degrees 54 Aquarius. So Pluto was exactly on the inauguration charts of Sun, and I'm taking the official inauguration, the legal inauguration, which happens at the stroke of noon. So that is moon on the Sun. Sorry, Pluto on the Sun. But look at the moon. The moon was at 337 Aquarius. So the moon was right on Saturn. So there was a Sun-Saturn conjunction at the time of Biden's inauguration in January 2021, and then there's the Moon-Pluto conjunction at the time of him pulling out, which in a way it kind of links with that chart, because the angular separation between the Sun and Pluto, between the Moon and Pluto at the time he pulled out, is the same as the angular separation between the Sun and Saturn at the time of the inauguration. As far as picks for the vice president, as far as I can see, the main candidates are Josh Shapiro and Pete Buttigieg, you could say Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer, but I think there are problems with both, because you do not want to have, with Gavin Newsom, can you have two Californians on a ticket? I'm not sure you can. There's nothing wrong with having two women on a ticket, I suppose, if she had Gretchen Whitmer as her vice presidential candidate. I mean, there's logically nothing wrong with it, because you've had two men on a ticket since the beginning. That's all very common, but two women on a ticket, I somehow think that they might try to avoid that, or Kamala might try to avoid that. I don't know. But from what I can see, the most likely candidates are Pete Buttigieg and Josh Shapiro. So I don't have a time of birth for either. And I'm not going to spend very long on these two people. But Josh Shapiro, he is the governor of Pennsylvania. And what's kind of interesting about Josh Shapiro is, okay, he's a Gemini, late Gemini, but definitely a Gemini, even though I don't know his time of birth. And he's got his sun at 28:44 Gemini, assuming he's born at noon in Kansas City, Missouri. And his sun is square Mars. So he's got sun square Mars. His Mars looks a bit problematic. I know that your favourite Canadian Prime Minister has Mars at 29 Pisces, I think. Isn't that right? I think he does. Yeah, Justin Trudeau. I think he was born... Wasn't Justin Trudeau born around here? But anyway, we're not talking about Justin Trudeau. So Josh Shapiro has a Sun-Mars square, and his Mars is on Skeet, and Mars is very close to the Aries point. Okay, Mars on the Aries point is quite dynamic, even if it's in Pisces. But I think that Sun square Mars could, in the end, get him into trouble, possibly. And we shouldn't forget that Neptune is... He's got Neptune right now conjunct his Mars, and he's got Neptune square his Sun. I don't know how that's working. Maybe he's handling it, but this T square, okay, he's got Mars opposition Pluto. Josh Shapiro is someone who's really into power. That's for certain, and we already know he's governor of Pennsylvania. You've got to be quite focused to become governor of Pennsylvania. And so he's got Mars-Pluto opposition. He's got Sun square Mars, Sun square Pluto. So he's certainly ambitious. But with all these ambitions, he's now got Neptune hitting this T-square. Now, the Neptune is retrograde. So if he does become the vice presidential pick, then it will move away. And... so maybe he'll be off the hook if he is vice president by the time of the elections. But I mean, his chart. Okay, so he's got Moon Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius. Moon Jupiter conjunctions are always nice. Trine Uranus. I think that that is a good conjunction, even though we don't know where his moon is. And he's got Moon trine Uranus, and he's got Saturn and Saturn, Sun conjunct Saturn. I don't know. I suppose that just means that he's quite sort of hard-working, quite focused. His Mercury, he's got Mercury. He's got stuff in Cancer. He's got Mercury at. He's got a Mercury-Venus conjunction, so it's quite a balanced chart. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with that chart, except that Sun-Mars square. And I think one does need to be slightly concerned about it. But again, I don't have his time of birth. Then the other candidate is Pete Buttigieg. Have I pronounced that right? Almost certainly not. But so here is his chart. Again, I don't have a time of birth. Note it. He's quite young. He's going. What is he? He's 42, and he has stuff in Aquarius. His moon, we don't know where his moon is. Oh, that's always a problem if you don't know where his moon is. Moon at noon is at 29 something Scorpio. So his moon is either in Scorpio or it's in Sagittarius. We don't know which. But I'm thinking with Pete Buttigieg, I do have a kind of a bit of a bad feeling about it. I don't somehow feel that he is the right candidate. I think part of the problem would be what is happening in his chart at the time of the presidential election. So here is Pete Buttigieg's chart in the middle, and on the outer wheel we have the presidential election. You know, this is the evening of November the 5th, I suppose, when the results are coming in. I suppose this is a time where it's becoming clear who's won, who's lost. And there's his sun at 2918 Capricorn. Now, he's definitely a Capricorn. If we take noon, even if he's born right at the end of the day, he's still going to be a Capricorn. And Pluto is going to be on his sun in the run-up to the election. Further, and the day before the election, there is a Mars-Pluto opposition. And so he's going to have Mars opposition his sun and Pluto conjunct his sun at the time of the election, if he were to be the vice presidential candidate. So I think that could be a problem, and that might be something that Kamala Harris might want to avoid if she really is a nominee, and if she does have to pick a vice presidential candidate. And of course, logically, you would have think that she needs to win Pennsylvania, doesn't she? So you would have thought logically she should choose Josh Shapiro to help her in Pennsylvania, although it has been said that it doesn't matter who you pick as vice presidential candidate. Vice presidential candidates can only hurt you. If you choose the wrong candidate, they can't help you. I probably should have sort of looked in greater detail at Peter Buttigieg and Josh Shapiro, but my hunch is that possibly she should go for Josh Shapiro, but still, Josh Shapiro does have Neptune problems. And I'm just wondering how those Neptune problems are going to play out. And of course, we're assuming that, these are wonderful candidates. That's what the Democrats tell us. I suppose with Pete Buttigieg, he might be damaged by the train derailment. Where was it? In East Palestine? Was that on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border? And I don't think it was in Pennsylvania, but still, there may be a problem with Buttigieg in terms of campaigning in Pennsylvania because of that, or in Ohio. You've got to make some effort to get Ohio, even though it does seem to be at the moment a red state. So turning finally to the Democratic Convention, and I think this is really interesting, the Democratic Convention. The Democratic Convention starts on August the 19th. And I believe this is when everything gets finalized. And it's in Chicago. I've no idea when it starts. I've just gone for 5 p.m. So it doesn't mean anything this particular time. This Democratic Convention, from an astrological perspective, is a train wreck. Talking about trains again. This really is a train wreck. So the problem with this Democratic Convention is it starts on a full moon. There's the sun, 27 Leo, on the day it starts. The moon at 5 o'clock in the afternoon is at 29 Aquarius. And so that's the first thing. And it's not just any full moon, is it? It's a full moon which is exactly on Uranus. Uranus is still fairly close to Algol, by the way. So you've got Sun exactly square Uranus. You've got Moon exactly square Uranus. So if we that's with Kamala Harris. So hold on, let's find the full moon before. So yeah, this is the full moon on August the 19th, 2024, on the day the Democratic convention starts. The day. Here's the full moon. And this full moon, you can see, moon is at 27 Aquarius. Sun is at 2715 Aquarius. Moon at 2715 Aquarius. Sun at 2715 Leo. Uranus at 2711 Taurus. This is a disastrous full moon anyway. But didn't they think about this? When you would have thought if they were trying to choose the date to have a convention, they would have avoided a full moon, particularly if it's exactly square Uranus. I mean, logically, wouldn't that be the case? I understand there's a tight window, but you would have surely tried to avoid this. And then that's not the only problem with this chart. This is a full moon chart, which is pretty much the same as the start of the convention, because the convention starts on the time of a full moon. You've got Venus opposition Saturn, and you've got Mars, Jupiter on the T. So you've got a T square involving Venus and Saturn, Mars and Jupiter. If you want to play around with Black Moon Lilith, you can throw that in as well. That doesn't help. That Venus conjunct Black Moon Lilith. I don't think this is really very helpful. And if we look at this full moon from the perspective of the 90-degree dial, again, this is the full moon set for Chicago. So if I look at the midheaven tree, there is this Mars, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, this big there's all the planets in the T square put together, and then there's the midheaven, and it makes there's a symmetry with the ascendant. So this is a really bad sign. But that's not all. That's not the only thing going wrong with this Democratic National Convention. There's the issue of the United States chart. So here is the horoscope of the United States. Now, of course, we do not know when exactly they signed it, but this is a chart that astrologers use, 5:10 p.m. It seems to work quite well. So, the moon. Where is the moon? The moon, the United States chart, is at 2710 Aquarius. And Black Moon Lilith is coming up again in America's chart, because United States was born very close to the opposition of Moon opposition Black Moon Lilith. What that means is, at the time the Declaration of Independence was signed, the moon was at perigee. It means that the moon was at its closest point to the Earth on July the 4th, 1776. Now, by the way, that's what you'd expect. Logically, if you're going to use Black Moon Lilith, you would expect at the point of perigee the moon to be opposition Black Moon Lilith by definition. If you were to use the mean Black Moon Lilith, just for example, you can see that the moon is miles away from the opposition of Black Moon Lilith, and that doesn't make any sense if you use it. And I think that's a reason why as far as I'm concerned, you should not use the Black Moon Lilith, the mean Black Moon Lilith, because it just doesn't line up with the apogees and the perigees as far as I can see. But anyway, that's a distraction. I didn't really want to spend too much time talking about that. So that's the United States chart. So when we compare the United States chart with the Democratic National Convention for so in a way, you know, this is what no, that's the wrong way around. I want to have it the other way around. I want to put on the inner wheel, I want to put the USA, because we want to know what the Democratic National Convention is doing to the USA. So there's a USA chart, Democratic National Convention on the outer wheel. So it's the United States' lunar return. So there's the United States' moon at 27 Aquarius. Uranus is square the United States' moon. And, of course, the sun is opposition the United States' moon. So the moon represents the people. What Americans are going to think about this? And the masses of the people. I mean, the people on the ground also in Chicago, of course. We don't know whether sort of Palestinian issues are going to crop up. It's interesting that Josh Shapiro is a big fan of Israel. He's a big supporter of Israel. And, of course, certain pro-Palestinian activists, if he was made vice president, they might not be too happy about that. But overall, we can see that the Democratic National Convention is going to be an absolutely dreadful event. Things are going to go wrong. The fact that it's on a full moon, this is absolutely disastrous. So it may be that, you know, as in 1968, with the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, really sealed the fate of the Democrats in the 1968 election, it could very well be the case that the Democratic National Convention on the 19th seals the fate of the Democrats in the November election. Now, I know people have been saying this anyway. It's not exactly an original view, but it's the fact that the astrology of the situation, that full moon, square Uranus at the time of the Democratic National Convention, and the fact that convention, you know, it hits, you know, that full moon hits the United States' moon. This is bad. This is really bad. Okay, that's it. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say. I hope that you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I would be really grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe, and if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.